Okay, so we are back and we're picking up with part 2 of our Doom Demon Sculpt. This is the progress we made in the last video, and in this video we're going to be going through the process of some accessory creation for our devilishly good looking friend here. If this sounds interesting to you, consider subscribing and hitting the bell icon to receive a notification whenever I post a new video. Without further ado, let's jump into it. The first thing I'm going to create is some little mechanical tube ventricles going from the base of the skull. To do this, I'll create a simple shape and I'll repeat it using a combination of mirror and array modifiers. I'll then set this shape to follow the path of a curve. Once again, I have my reference up with plenty of art from the Doom video game, as well as hard surface reference of mechanical items that are informing the shape design I want to go for. Once I have our tube created, I'll attach it to a Bezier curve and I'll start moving it into place on our character. I'll use Alt-S to adjust the size of the various ends of the curve, as well as setting the curve to automatic from aligned by tapping V. This ensures that the rotation between each vertex on the curve adjusts as I'm moving it into place. Once I have the tube mirrored onto our character, I'm going to start working on giving him an armored chest rig. Without a hard concept in front of me, I'll start in the dirtiest way I know how, by dropping in a cube, remeshing it, and carving out some shapes. Throughout the sculpting process, I'll only be using the default sculpting tools available in Blender 2.83. I'll primarily be using the standard brush and the sculpt brush to carve out the hard surface forms of the armor, as well as using the draw sharp and pinch brush to create the hard seam lines and sharp corners of the armor. Finally, I'll use the mask brush to selectively make large changes to various portions of the mesh, as well as creating various insets and extracting off separate parts to be sculpted. Similar to ZBrush, you'll probably find you have difficulties sculpting on a mesh that's too thin, especially if you're using a large brush. One option to help with this would be to turn on front face only by going under the brush settings and checking under advanced. But in most instances, you'll probably have to use the inflate brush to widen out the girth of your mesh. For some more advanced sculpting tips, I highly recommend checking out Zach Reinhardt from CG Boost, as well as Jan Sculpt's incredible character creation videos. I'm fairly happy with how the sculpt is going so far. I decided to give our demon character a few more tubey ventricles, as well as splitting off the backpack from the armored chest rig. I'll eventually merge these two parts back together later on in the video. I'm still trying to stay as loose as possible so that I'm not afraid to make large sweeping changes to the mesh. You'll frequently see me add details and carve out new shapes, only to smooth them out and undo them to start again. At this point, I'm simply interested in finding interesting shapes as well as learning the tools for myself. Although I don't do it enough in this sculpt, I highly recommend playing with disabling the symmetry options to add areas of asymmetric detail. This can really help to make your sculpts far more visually interesting to look at. Next up, we're going to be giving our demon character some horns, and we're going to be using the same workflow that you've seen many character artists use in Blender to create stylized hair strands. For this process, we'll create two curves. One will be used to create the path of the horns, the other one will be used as the taper object, which will define the shape profile of the horn. Just like before, I'll use Alt-S to scale and shrink the origin and end of our horns, and then simply incorporate it into our character. Once I'm happy with the shape of the curve, I'll convert the curve into a mesh. Then I'll make sure to close both ends of the curve. This way when I remesh, it doesn't go crazy. This is because remesh really doesn't like it when you have any open holes on your geometry. For refining the horns, I'll simply be using the standard brush, draw sharp, and clay strips. Since we're sculpting in symmetry, you can be sure to eliminate any mirror modifiers. I was having some issues here when I realized I still had a modifier open. I simply deleted one side of the mesh and then resymmetrized in sculpt mode. Although we no longer have curve controls over the horn, you can still use the grab brush to make large sweeping shapes to the path of the horns, as well as using the grab brush on other areas of the mesh. In total, I probably spent a little over 2 hours sculpting in this section of the video. From here, I'll probably spend another half hour doing some refinements. Feel free to skip ahead to the end of the video to see the final results. Otherwise, enjoy the time lapse. I'd like to give a quick thank you to everyone who's been subscribing and leaving awesome feedback lately. Even though it's not huge, this channel has been growing at a much faster pace than I initially expected. As for our sculpture, you could certainly spend a lot longer on this than I did, but for the purpose of this video, I'm going to call it a day and cut it off here. For the final touches, I'll create a quick lighting setup, I'll throw in a camera and see if I can get some interesting renders. So if I haven't said it already, thanks for watching and have fun sculpting.